Hello. Imagine your end does not begin with an enemy's sword, or with betrayal, or a poisoned cup, but with the slow, humiliating decay of your own body, with sores, foul smells, weakness, fear, and the silent stares of those who once swore loyalty to you. But before you get comfortable, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is there. I'm really curious to see who's joined us. Now get comfortable. We're starting. You awaken in the pre-dawn chill of Westminster Palace, a king, but only on parchment and in the anxious eyes of your servants. Your body is an argument against monarchy, a reminder that power cannot keep a man alive, nor can velvet and fur insulate flesh from rot. Your sheets are damp with sweat, which is not so different from waking in the middle of a battlefield, except that now the enemy is inside you and will not be bargained with. There is an ache in every joint, a heaviness in your chest, as if a sack of stones has been placed upon it. The aches are familiar. They have been with you for months, maybe years. One forgets, after a while, when health was last a constant companion. The tapestries on your walls do nothing to soften the feeling that the room is shrinking around you. You cough, and the sound is weak, less than a herald's announcement, and more like a whispered rumor. Once, courtiers rushed to answer your slightest command. Now they listen outside your door, unsure whether your groan signals a royal wish or merely the next note in the slow symphony of your demise. You imagine them out there, exchanging glances, silently placing wagers on how many more mornings you will greet. Your body is not your own. Your limbs tremble when you try to reach for the ewer of water, hands shaking as if you have been condemned for cowardice. You recall the stories they tell of you in the streets, how the king cannot even hold his own cup, as if you have chosen this, as if you are not constantly fighting the betrayal of your own bones and blood. The air in the room is thick, damp, and slightly sour. It is the sort of smell you remember from peasant hovels during your campaigns in Wales, not from the sanctified bedchamber of a crowned sovereign. And yet, the greater your rank, the more noticeable your decay. You are reminded, with a note of grim humor, that you are both too important to die quietly and too sick to die with dignity. This is how it begins, not with a sudden bolt, but with the slow, relentless erosion of everything that made you feel powerful. The fever comes and goes, but the sense of futility is constant. You close your eyes and attempt to recall the taste of victory, the heat of battle, the way your horse moved beneath you. It all feels unreal now, something that happened to someone else in a different body under a different sky. There is a knock at the door. You do not respond, but the knock repeats, tentative. A servant, brave or merely desperate for distraction, enters. He keeps his eyes on the floor and speaks with the deference of one addressing a ghost. My lord, the physician awaits outside. His voice is strained, brittle. You imagine he will spend the rest of his day scrubbing his hands and muttering prayers to stave off your contagion. You are tempted to laugh, but even that would take too much strength. Instead, you signal for water, and the servant scurries to pour it. You sip, though every swallow feels like negotiating with a rusty hinge. The water is tepid and faintly metallic, a subtle reminder of the city's filth and the doctor's eternal warnings about bad humors. No one expects you to recover. You do not expect it yourself. Outside, you hear voices, cautious, urgent, laced with a hope that is indistinguishable from fear. For a moment, you wonder what they are saying, and then you realize it hardly matters. Kings are not remembered for their deaths, unless they are memorable for the wrong reasons. You are uncomfortably aware that your end is shaping up to be the latter. You look at your trembling hand, knuckles swollen, skin tight and blotchy, as though you have been borrowed from the grave and will soon have to give yourself back. There is no part of you that does not ache. There is no morning now, only a lengthening night. Your hands, those royal appendages that once signed decrees and gripped the hilt of your sword, are reduced to trembling instruments barely capable of lifting a wooden cup. You stare at them with a mixture of resentment and grim amusement, watching the veins snake under paper thin skin. No amount of ceremony can hide the way your fingers now curl in on themselves, stiff and swollen, like roots in bad soil. You reach for water, though it tastes little better than rain pooled in the gutters of Cheapside. Your physicians, that perpetual parade of grim men in dark robes and grave faces, have ordered only boiled water for you. They say this is to prevent further humors from invading your failing body, though you doubt even the purest spring in England could cut through the taste of illness on your tongue. The water arrives lukewarm in a heavy pewter cup, a far cry from the jeweled goblets of feasts past. When you attempt to lift it, your hand shakes so badly that droplets run down your chin and soak into your beard. The servants, those shadowy figures that drift through your chambers like mourners, keep their distance. You see them glancing at you from corners, exchanging quick, nervous looks whenever they think you are not watching. You are certain they discuss your condition in hushed voices when they gather outside your door. No one in the palace truly believes you will recover, not anymore. You can see it in the way they avoid your gaze and the way they step back when you cough. The air of Westminster is thick with anticipation, the sort of anxious waiting that comes before a storm or a funeral. You find your mind drifting back to yesterday's council meeting, a disaster if you are honest, though no one will dare say it aloud. You recall the way the great lords arranged themselves along the walls, their finery a weak defense against the stench of sickness. They came, you think, less to serve than to see with their own eyes how close the king is to death. Each of them wore the same expression, part horror, part calculation. They looked at you as though measuring the space your corpse would soon occupy. You tried to speak, to direct the discussion, but your voice cracked and wavered, betraying your weakness. It is difficult to command respect when your own body cannot be commanded. You saw one lord discreetly pinch his nose with a scented handkerchief, and another carefully avoid the chair closest to your side. Perhaps they fear leprosy, perhaps they hope for it. There is nothing so thrilling for the ambitious as a dying king. Now, in the dim solitude of your chamber, you wonder if it might have been better to let the meeting proceed without you, to let the government drift for a day or two while you focused on the endless struggle of simply surviving until morning. But you are Henry, king by the will of God, and you have never allowed absence from pain or politics. That at least you tell yourself. The truth is, you do not trust them to rule without your hand on the reins, not even for an hour. That is the curse of power. Even as it slips away, you must clutch at it, fingers white knuckled and trembling. Your illness, whatever it truly is, leprosy, or perhaps some unnamed curse, has become the court's favorite subject. The rumors multiply in the shadows. Some say you are being punished by heaven for usurping Richard. Others whisper of poisons slipped into your food or secret French plots. You know better, of course. The only conspiracy is the slow, inevitable betrayal of your own flesh. A sharp pain lances up your arm as you try to shift in bed. You wince, hissing between your teeth. A servant, braver or merely more foolish than the others, glances in your direction before quickly busying himself with the fire. You consider calling him over, but the thought of trying to explain this pain, the thousandth of the day, makes you tired. Instead, you settle back into the damp pillow and close your eyes. Behind your lids, memories flicker. A younger you, strong and certain, leading men in battle, riding for days without rest. Now, it is an accomplishment merely to stand. There is a peculiar humiliation in watching your own body fail you, in feeling the slow, creeping decay that no title can arrest. You try to recall what it was like to be healthy, to wake without dread, but those memories are already fading, replaced by the constant itch of sweat and the sour taste of fear. Outside, the city wakes to another gray day. The bells toll in the abbey, and the market women cry their wares on the strand. Life continues, indifferent to the agony of kings. You, however, are caught in a different rhythm, a relentless march from one uncomfortable hour to the next. No council can legislate reprieve, no decree can halt the rot. Even the birds, you think with some bitterness, are free to fly where they wish, while you are prisoner in your own skin. You turn your face toward the window. The light is thin and watery, and you catch your reflection in the glass. Hollow cheeks, eyes ringed in darkness, a face more suited to a tomb than a throne. You are Henry, King of England, and you are dying by inches, as all kings must. It is not just your hands that betray you now. Your entire body seems an open revolt. The short journey from your bed to the council chamber has become a pilgrimage you dread. Each step is a negotiation, every breath a wager. Your knees creak and complain, your hips ache, and the soles of your feet feel as if you have been walking on hot stones. You catch yourself sighing at these small agonies, as if sighing will somehow shame them into silence. Yesterday's attempt to gather your counsel haunts you still, a procession of humiliation dressed up as governance. There was a time you commanded their attention with a look, a word, the subtle tap of fingers on the arm of your chair. Now, their eyes slide away from you, unable to meet your gaze for more than a moment. You see it in their faces, revulsion thinly veiled as concern, calculation behind every carefully composed question. You imagine, with a dry sort of humor, that somewhere someone has begun keeping an unofficial tally. Number of times the king coughs, number of times the king fumbles his cup, number of lords who manage not to gag when entering your presence. The council chamber, once the theater of your authority, now feels like a sick room that everyone wants to leave. You remember how one baron pressed a perfumed cloth to his face and blamed it on the damp, while another made an elaborate show of rearranging his seat to be further from you, murmuring something about a draft from the window. You would laugh if it did not hurt to do so. They speak, as always, in the formal tones of loyalty, but there is a hunger in the way they eye your seat. How much longer, you wonder, before they begin openly plotting? You would not blame them. Kings are not loved for long, not when the scent of mortality clings to them as closely as yours does now. Rumors swirl, thick as the smoke from the hearth. You hear them, muffled but insistent, as they drift through the palace corridors. Some say you suffer from the holy fire. Some claim a leprosy sent by God as punishment for Richard's deposition. Others mutter of witchcraft or French poisoners. If only the truth were so dramatic. In reality, your sickness is altogether more banal. The slow collapse of a body that no longer wishes to obey. There is something especially cruel, you think, in being brought so low by so ordinary a foe. No valiant last stand, no poetic demise, just sores, weakness, and endless, unremarkable pain. Your doctors, an endless parade of apothecaries, surgeons, and herbalists, argue in your antechamber about whether you should be bled again, or purged, or perhaps merely left alone to die with what little dignity remains. One proposes a poultice of garlic and honey. Another insists on the application of leeches behind your ears. You submit to their ministrations with weary resignation, not because you expect relief, but because it is easier to be bled than to argue. Besides, the discomfort of their remedies is only marginally worse than the discomfort of doing nothing at all. Your body is a canvas for their theories. Ointments, compresses, decoctions of bitter herbs, endless admonitions to take more broth and avoid all cold foods. Each day brings a new indignity. Yesterday, they forced you to drink a syrup so vile it made you retch for hours. Today, they wrapped your legs in strips of linen soaked in vinegar, promising it would draw out the bad humors. If this is what healing looks like, you wonder grimly, what could death possibly hold in store? And yet it is not the pain or the treatments that truly gall you. It is the looks, the way your courtiers stare at you when they think you are not watching, the way even your closest confidants seem to shrink from your touch. You have become, in some silent and unspoken way, an outcast within your own palace. No title can shield you from this particular exile. You find yourself, in the darker hours, dwelling on Richard. Did he feel the same alienation, this steady erosion of self, as the world conspired to forget him? It is a question you cannot answer. The past, like your health, is a country now closed to you. You watch as the daylight creeps across your chamber wall, lengthening and retreating, marking the passage of another tedious, uncomfortable day. The hours are long and empty, filled only with the sound of your own shallow breathing, the occasional footfall of a nervous servant, the distant peal of bells from the abbey. You begin to understand why the dying so often turn to prayer. There is little else left to do. When sleep finally comes, it is brief and unsatisfying. You drift through muddled dreams of battlefields and feasts, only to wake to the relentless sameness of your sick room. You lie there, staring up at the faded canopy, and wonder how many more mornings you will endure before your courtiers no longer have to avert their eyes. In the end, it is not death you fear, but this interminable waiting, the knowledge that you are already half forgotten, a king in name only, a living emblem of decline. You close your eyes and let out a slow, shuddering breath. Outside, the world continues on, indifferent to the fate of one more failing king. The day grows no brighter as your physician, Sir John, shuffles into your chamber, trailed by a boy burdened with jars, pouches, and instruments of uncertain purpose. Sir John has been at your side since the beginning of your illness, and though he speaks with a confidence befitting a man of science, you are not convinced he understands any more than you do what afflicts you. His remedies change with the phases of the moon. Yesterday he was certain your humors needed balancing. Today he seemed determined to drown you in concoctions whose ingredients remain mercifully mysterious. He bows, careful not to meet your gaze, and gestures for the boy to prepare a poultice of herbs. The smell of crushed garlic and spoiled honey fills the air, a sickly sweet reminder of how desperate men become when faced with the slow, steady rot of a king. The poultice is warm when pressed to your arm, and you endure it with the resignation of one who has run out of ways to protest. Sir John mutters about driving out the corruption, but you hear only the futility in his voice. Your skin is a map of your decline. What was once merely an irritating rash has become a patchwork of raw, weeping sores that stretch from your forearms to your chest. Every movement threatens to tear the fragile scabs, and you flinch even when the lightest linen shifts against your body. You recall the whispered diagnosis of leprosy, once the terror of saints and beggars alike, though no one dares utter the word aloud in your presence. In private, you suspect the truth is even less dignified, not divine punishment, but merely the consequence of time, stress, and the indifferent roll of fate's dice. Sir John produces a silver spoon and fills it with a thick brown syrup. The boy stands ready with a bowl in case you retch, which you almost do. The liquid tastes of rotten fruit and iron filings. It will fortify the blood, Majesty, Sir John assures you, his eyes flickering with the hope of professional salvation. You want to ask if it will also restore your appetite or allow you to keep a meal down, but the effort of forming words is suddenly too much. Food has become another ordeal. The kitchen sends up its best: mutton boiled to softness, sweet custards thickened with eggs, ale gone flat for safety's sake, But nothing tempts you. Each bite is a labor, every swallow a challenge. Most days you manage a few spoonfuls of broth, and even that sometimes comes back up before it can do you any good. Once your appetite was legendary. Now, the sight of roast meats and pies fills you with a queasy dread. You remember, with a certain bleak humor, how much trouble your cooks took to impress you in healthier days. Now they do not bother to garnish the plates. Even your beard, once a source of vanity, is now patchy and coarse, flecked with stains and crumbs you are too tired to brush away. The mirror is a torture instrument, and you turn your head from it whenever possible. Still, you cannot escape the looks of your attendants, the careful, sidelong glances, the way they hover near your door, murmuring to each other in voices they think you cannot hear. You have become both king and curiosity, a living case study for the ambitious, the superstitious, and the opportunistic. You cannot help but reflect on the other, less visible wounds your illness has inflicted. There is a loneliness in being so constantly observed, yet so utterly isolated. No one touches you except to administer treatment or change the sheets. Even your closest companions are kept at arm's length, whether out of fear or respect. You used to command a room with a word. Now you are grateful when your presence does not clear it altogether. Sir John's visit concludes as they all do. A new set of bandages, a fresh layer of ointment, a promise to return at sunset with some other remedy drawn from the ever shrinking well of hope. You thank him with the dignity expected of a monarch, though inside you feel more like an experiment than a patient. When the door finally closes behind him, you are left with only the quiet ticking of the coals and the slow, stifling weight of your own breath. Sometimes, in the silent moments between treatments, you wonder what you have become. Your body, once an instrument of power, has turned into a collection of weaknesses to be cataloged and managed. The crown sits untouched on its velvet cushion, a relic from another life. You stare at it and wonder how much it weighs now, how cold the metal will feel when your hand is too feeble to lift it. You try to distract yourself by recalling the old pleasures, riding through the autumn woods, the laughter of your children, the feeling of wind against your face on the ramparts at dawn. These memories come to you faded and unreliable, like stories you once heard but never truly lived. In their place is only the present, the ache, the heat, the constant attention of eyes waiting for you to falter, or worse, to simply stop. You consider, briefly, telling Sir John to cease his ministrations, to let nature run its course. But kings do not surrender easily, even to inevitability. Instead, you lie back and close your eyes, listening as the world narrows to the sound of your own breathing, the muffled clatter of dishes outside your door, and the faint, unrelenting throb of pain that marks each passing minute. Outside, the city moves on. You imagine the bells of Westminster pealing, the Thames sliding past in its muddy persistence, and all the life that goes on untroubled by the struggles of a dying king. Inside, you wait, half patient, half prisoner, wholly aware that you are, above all, an example of what power cannot prevent. The memories of battle come to you, unbidden, as you lie in your sick bed with nothing but the sound of your own shallow breaths and the distant clatter of palace life for company. Once, the world outside this chamber knew you as a man of action, a king who took his throne not by birthright, but by force, who rode at the head of his army and led men through mud and blood and fear. Those days feel impossibly distant now, like a tale you used to enjoy before you understood how it must end. You try to summon the sensation of strength, the way your arms felt after a long day holding a sword, the surge of certainty that came when your horse thundered beneath you, the rush of voices chanting your name as you rode past battered banners. In the heat of campaign, pain was something to be mastered, not endured. You wore bruises as badges and dismissed discomfort as the price of ambition. Now you flinch at the press of linen against your wounds, and your entire body aches from the simple act of sitting up. It is strange, this new existence where you are no longer master of your own flesh. You remember the fevered clamor of the field at Shrewsbury, the stink of sweat and metal and blood, the wild confusion when death came quickly and without warning. In those moments, you felt yourself impossibly alive, immortal almost, certain that no wound could truly reach you, that no force could unseat you from your chosen place. Yet here, in the quiet staleness of your chamber, death is not swift or noble. It creeps, insidious and unremarkable, dulling your senses one at a time. The pain is never sharp enough to inspire drama, never quite absent enough to let you forget. Instead, you exist in a limbo of aches, legs that refuse to bear your weight, hands that tremble until you cannot even lift a cup without spilling its contents, skin that crawls with irritation where once it was only calloused and sun darkened. Sometimes you hear the servants whisper outside your door, "How much weaker he looks today. How many more days can this possibly go on?" Did you hear him groan when the physician applied that poultice? You wonder if this is what the fallen soldiers you once stepped over on muddy battlefields felt in the brief moments before they were trampled underfoot or abandoned to the crows. There is an irony in it. A king brought low not by blade or arrow, but by the slow, humiliating theft of every scrap of vigor he ever possessed. Once you believed your will was enough to bend the world. The stories of your youth, your campaigns against the Welsh, your skirmishes in the north, were lessons in persistence, in the power of command. There were days when even your enemies seemed to pause, unwilling to believe that you could be beaten. Yet here, in your own palace, you are bested by stares, by cold drafts, by the impossibility of sleep. You try, some days, to speak words of encouragement to your closest attendants. They nod and smile and leave the room as quickly as they can, eager to pass on the details of your decline to others in the shadowed corridors. You can see it in their faces, the impatience of those forced to witness a slow undoing, the secret hope that tomorrow might bring a change, any change, even the final one. Your family keeps their distance. The children, who once climbed into your lap and begged for stories of your victories, now appear at your bedside with hesitant steps, eyes averted. Your wife's visits are briefer each week. She sits beside you, hands folded, asking after your health in a tone that is neither hopeful nor hopeless, just tired. You cannot blame them. You remember your own father's decline, the awkwardness you felt as he grew small before your eyes. Even the trappings of kingship, robes, rings, the heavy golden seal, are more burden than comfort. When attendants dress you in the morning, it is like preparing a statue for public display. Powder to hide the red blotches on your skin, fine linen to disguise your thinness, perfume to mask the odor that clings to you despite endless baths. You find yourself wishing you could shed all of it, the costumes and pretenses, and simply be a sick man rather than a sick king. But even this, it seems, is a privilege you do not possess. Outside, the city rumbles on. The world has little time for dying monarchs. The markets open, the bells ring, the Thames keeps moving. You can hear the distant life of London, the shouting of vendors, the creak of wagon wheels, the occasional peal of laughter. It is a reminder that while your world has shrunk to the size of a sickbed, the greater world endures, unimpressed by your suffering. At night, you dream of battles, sometimes with regret, sometimes with longing. In those dreams, you are whole again, leading men into the fray, shouting commands over the roar of horses and cannon. But each morning, you wake to the same bed, the same weak limbs, the same air thick with the knowledge that your life is measured now in aches and indignities. You wonder, in your darker moments, if this is the real price of power. Not that you must die, for all men do, but that you must die where everyone can see and talk and judge. Your story, once a record of triumph and struggle, has become a lesson in defeat, a cautionary tale whispered in palace halls, repeated in kitchens, told to young pages as a warning. No one prepares you for the reality that even your decline will be public property, debated and dissected by men who have never known what it means to ride into danger or stare down a wall of spears. Still, there are moments, fleeting but real, when you feel a sort of grim amusement at it all. Once, you would have fought this with every last shred of will, but now you find yourself too tired even for anger. You simply wait, day after day, for the end to come, knowing that when it does, it will be as unremarkable as the illness itself. Once, the royal kitchens were your pride and your arsenal. You remember feasts where the great hall groaned with the weight of pies and roasts, where barrels of wine were uncorked with ceremony, and nobles jostled for a place at your table. There were banquets so lavish they became the talk of the continent, the kind of events chroniclers preserved in ink and gold leaf. How absurd it all seems now, when even the smell of food is enough to turn your stomach, and the only appetite you possess is a hollow, gnawing ache somewhere far behind your ribs. Mornings begin with the arrival of the royal steward, his face set in a look of forced cheerfulness as he describes the day's menu, as though naming the dishes might coax you back to life. A broth of veal, Majesty, delicately seasoned and strained for clarity, soft bread, apples stewed with honey, a custard, if your appetite permits. You listen to the recitation, nodding politely, feeling as remote from it all as a pauper pressed against the palace gate. Your meals arrive on silver trays, carried by servants who have learned not to meet your eyes. They set the bowls before you, bow, and retreat quickly, as though fearing to catch the disease by proximity alone. The broth is warm and faintly scented with herbs, but you find yourself dreading the first sip, knowing it will end as all the others have. A few swallows at most, and then a wave of nausea so powerful you clutch at the bed sheets to steady yourself. You try, at first, to force yourself to eat. You are, after all, still a king. Surely your will is enough to overcome the petty rebellion of your stomach. But your body has other plans. The first spoonful slides across your tongue and seems to multiply into 1,000 strange textures: oily, gritty, too sweet, too bland. You swallow, and it sits heavily in your gut, a leaden thing. Each bite becomes a negotiation, each meal a trial. Soon you are able to manage only a few sips of watery gruel, the rest left to cool and congeal beside your bed until a servant quietly removes the tray. The court physicians observe this with grave concern. They recommend bland foods, then rich ones, then suggest perhaps a glass of wine to settle your humors. You try each in turn, and all produce the same result: a cloying taste, a twist of the gut, and the old familiar nausea. Once, you would have joked that your enemies would have envied a poison so effective, but now even humor is beyond you. Your mouth, once quick with retort or command, is raw and sore. The papery skin inside splits and burns, and no amount of honey or wine eases the discomfort. Even water leaves a metallic tang that lingers long after you have finished drinking. Your tongue feels swollen, and sometimes you catch yourself mumbling words as if your own mouth were foreign territory. The cooks do what they can, though you imagine your illness is as unwelcome in their domain as rats or fire. Gone are the spiced venison, the delicate pastries, the creamy cheeses imported at such expense from distant lands. In their place is an endless procession of boiled meats, bland puddings, and stewed fruit. There is an irony to it. You possess the wealth of a kingdom, yet cannot enjoy the simplest meal. You recall, with a twist of regret, the laughter of your companions at the table, the competition for the choicest morsel, the convivial racket of feasting after a campaign. These days, the only sounds at your table are the faint scrape of a spoon, the cautious footsteps of servants clearing away another untouched dish, the rustle of your own breathing. Sometimes you almost wish they would stop bringing food entirely and spare you the charade. It is not only the loss of appetite that troubles you. Your sense of taste has grown unreliable, then nearly vanished. You can distinguish sweet from sour, but the subtleties that once delighted you, rosemary in a roast, the sharp bite of garlic, the mellow comfort of bread fresh from the oven, are gone. Each meal blurs into the next, the monotony broken only by the occasional spike of nausea or a sudden memory of flavors you will never taste again. You wonder, in the privacy of your mind, how much of this is the illness, and how much is simply the mind's way of retreating from a world that no longer holds pleasure. Your body, ever practical, saves its remaining strength for the hard labor of breathing and the pain of keeping yourself upright. You find yourself growing thin, your cheeks hollowing, your hands looking more like talons than those of a monarch. When you catch your reflection in a polished plate, it is almost a relief that you do not recognize yourself. Some days, the kitchen sends up food that once would have made your mouth water, a pie stuffed with spiced lamb, a custard set trembling in a silver cup. You lift the lid, inhale the faint distant scent, and feel nothing. The food is not for you anymore, not really. It is for the servants, for the ritual, for the shadow of kingship that remains after appetite is gone. The act of eating, once a celebration of life and strength, has become another exercise in endurance. You chew and swallow because that is what is expected of you, a habit left over from when such things mattered. Sometimes you manage to keep a meal down, and the physicians look hopeful, but the feeling of victory is short lived. You know it is only a matter of time before even this meager effort is beyond you. Outside your chamber, the smells of the kitchen drift up on the evening air: roasting meat, fresh bread, the tang of cider, reminders of a world that has moved on without you. You find yourself drifting in and out of sleep, dreaming of banquets that turn to ashes in your mouth, of laughter that echoes down the empty corridors, of a table is set for a feast that never begins. When the servants return for your tray, you thank them, as always, with the weary dignity of a man who remembers what it meant to be king. They bow, gather the untouched food, and vanish as quickly as they came, leaving you with the hollow ache of hunger that is not really hunger at all, just another emptiness among so many. The mirror in your chamber, once a friend to vanity and an ally in the morning rituals of kingship, has become your adversary. It stands on a low table, silvered surface dulled by years of handling, and the faint scratches of cloths intended to polish away the evidence of time. You avoid its gaze now, instinctively turning your head whenever you catch the hint of your own reflection. But mirrors are not easily ignored, nor are the reminders of what you have become. The first time you noticed the change, it was almost subtle: a patch of skin on your cheek, red and rough, dismissed as a trifle, the result of winter air or a careless shave. But the patch grew, multiplied, became a network of sores and blotches that crept down your jaw and across your neck. Now, each morning, your attendants try to hide the damage beneath ointments that sting and linen wraps that itch. It is a losing battle. Your skin is not merely discolored, but ravaged, raw in places, shiny in others, and so delicate that even the softest touch threatens to draw blood. Your beard, once a symbol of your virility and command, is a patchwork affair now, uneven and coarse. Whole clumps have fallen away, leaving behind islands of angry, irritated skin. You recall the days when a new gray hair was a sign of dignity, something to stroke thoughtfully while listening to matters of state. Now, what hair remains is brittle and lifeless, as though it too has tired of clinging to a body that has outlived its prime. There is a particular humiliation in the rituals of care that fill your mornings. Your chamberlain arrives with a bowl of tepid water and a linen cloth, moving carefully, as if afraid the mere act of washing you might hasten your collapse. He does not look you in the face. Instead, he murmurs apologies as he dabs at the sores, his hands trembling. Sometimes you wonder if it is fear or pity that makes him so clumsy, but you are too tired to ask. You endure the process with the stoicism of a condemned man, watching the water in the basin grow cloudy with flakes of your own skin. Even the simplest acts, brushing your hair, adjusting your robe, have become burdens. The touch of fabric against your shoulders sends shocks of pain through your nerves. You flinch involuntarily, and your attendants pause, unsure whether to continue or retreat. Their hesitation speaks volumes. It is a language you have come to know. The careful steps, the averted eyes, the way they stand just a little farther away each week. You cannot help but notice the way others look at you now when they must look at all. The courtiers who once vied for your attention, eager for your favor, now regard you with a mixture of horror and embarrassment. Their eyes flicker past your face, seeking something, anything else to fix upon. Some do not bother to hide their revulsion. Others try too hard to appear unconcerned, their false cheerfulness more grating than silence. The children, when they come, are the worst. They stare with a frankness only the young possess, their curiosity untempered by courtly manners. You see the fear in their eyes, the way they inch closer to their mother's side, and you realize they are looking not at their father, but at a stranger, a creature half remembered from stories about the dangers of illness and the inevitability of decay. You do not blame them. There are days you barely recognize yourself. The physicians continue their endless experiments, as much to justify their presence as to ease your suffering. They press cold compresses to your face, apply pungent salves, prescribe ever stranger diets in hopes of slowing the spread of whatever malady has claimed you. Each morning brings a new hope, and each evening brings another disappointment. The sores remain, sometimes angry and swollen, sometimes dry and cracking, always present. You wonder, with a grim sort of humor, if your flesh is staging a slow rebellion, one patch at a time. Your nights are worse than your days. The itching is relentless, a maddening dance of discomfort that no amount of scratching can relieve. You wake to find blood on your sheets, under your nails, streaked across the linen like the tracks of some wounded animal. The servants change the bedding in silence, their faces careful masks. You close your eyes and pretend not to notice, but the evidence is everywhere, in the stains on your pillow, the stench in the air, the way your clothes hang looser with each passing week. It is not just as the outward signs that trouble you. Inside, you feel yourself slipping away from the person you once were. You remember the pride you took in your appearance, how a well-fitted tunic, a jeweled ring, a polished pair of boots could set you apart, declare your authority without a word. Now, none of it matters. The finest silk cannot disguise the trembling in your hands, the pallor of your cheeks, the way your eyes seem to sink deeper into their sockets with every sleepless night. You find yourself envying the statues in the chapel, unmarred by time or illness, forever young, forever regal. Their stone faces will never know the indignity of sores or the shame of weakness. You think sometimes of having all the mirrors in the palace covered, as is done for the dead, but you know it would make no difference. The truth of your condition is written in every glance, every whisper, every awkward pause. Your world has become smaller, bounded by the edges of your bed and the limits of your endurance. You see less of the palace, less of the sun. The windows are often shuttered against the drafts, and the only light is the flicker of candles, which cast long, distorted shadows across the room. You study these shadows, searching for signs of the man you once were, but find only flickers of memory. Some mornings you wake and for a moment do not remember where you are or why you hurt. Those are the best moments, brief and unrepeatable. Then the pain returns, and with it the realization that your only companions are the memories of youth and the steady, unsentimental advance of decay. You wonder sometimes how much longer this can continue, and whether anyone, yourself included, will remember who you were beneath the sores and the silence. Each evening, as the winter twilight thickens beyond your windows, your chamber is transformed into a place neither fully of the world nor entirely apart from it. The candles are lit, a dozen or more, flickering with little conviction against the gloom. Shadows gather in corners, growing deeper as the hour advances, until the ornate carvings and rich tapestries seem to retreat behind a veil of darkness. You remember when nightfall brought comfort, when the close of day meant rest, and the soft hush of the palace was a balm after the noise and labor of rule. Now, darkness is a cloak you cannot shrug off, a companion more insistent than any servant or kin. You are not alone, not truly. Evenings bring a steady procession of attendants, each with their own rituals. Some tend the fire, poking at the embers in a vain attempt to conjure warmth against the biting chill. Others gather around the bed, silent and watchful, waiting for any sign of need or distress. Their presence is reassuring and oppressive by turns, a reminder that even in your decline, you are not permitted solitude. They speak in low voices, careful not to disturb you, but you hear them all the same, their words tumbling together in a chorus of speculation and sympathy. Sometimes you think you hear other voices as well, ones that do not belong to the living. When the wind rattles the shutters, you imagine the murmur of long dead ancestors come to judge or comfort you as you slip, hour by hour, from their lineage into memory. You are not certain whether this is fever, fear, or something altogether more ordinary. The mind, left too long in silence, conjuring ghosts to fill the emptiness. The distinction matters less each night. Your thoughts turn, again and again, to the dead. You see them as the candles sputter, faces half remembered from youth, comrades and rivals, men whose names once filled your court and now haunt its corridors. You recall Richard, the king you unseated, and wonder what judgment he would pass on your present suffering. Was his exile a wound as deep as your own? Did he too stare into the darkness and listen for the voices of the past? It is hard to say which is heavier, the pain in your flesh, or the weight in your mind. Each night is an inventory of failures. You measure the passing days not by achievements, but by how little of yourself remains intact. There are nights when you cannot recall the taste of victory, when triumph feels as distant as a childhood fable. The world you built, brick by patient brick, seems poised to outlast you, unmoved by your absence. Sometimes you try to pray, mouthing the familiar words as the priest instructed. The prayers come haltingly, a stuttered rhythm of guilt and longing. You recall the lessons of your youth, the stern admonitions that kings are accountable to God before all else. But in this darkened room, the heavens seem far away, the ceiling pressing down with the weight of all you have left unsaid. You find yourself bargaining. One more day, one more night of peace, a little less pain in the morning. The bargains go unanswered. You wonder if anyone, even God, is listening. The darkness itself becomes a presence, thick and insistent. The candles cast strange, wavering patterns across the walls, shapes that seem to shift when you look away. Sometimes you think you see movement, shadows sliding along the stone, and your heart pounds with a sudden, inexplicable panic. You know, of course, that these are tricks of the mind and the failing eyes of a sick man. Still, the sense of being watched lingers. The room is never entirely empty. Your attendants, for all their care, have grown accustomed to your decline. They move quietly, avoiding the harshness of sudden noise, but their patience wears thin as the weeks pass. You sense their longing for relief, yours or their own, it hardly matters. The dying are not easy company, least of all when they linger too long. You remember, with a kind of sardonic clarity, the lessons from your own youth, that death, when it comes for kings, is a long affair, full of dignity and ritual. Now you see the truth. Death is not an event, but a slow erosion, a wearing away of self that leaves behind only weariness and discomfort. You think sometimes of escaping the room, of walking once more through the quiet galleries and gardens of the palace. In your mind, you retrace the old routes, down the long corridor to the chapel, through the cloistered court, out onto the dew-damp lawns where you once watched the city wake. But your body refuses even these small flights of fancy. The effort of rising from bed is beyond you, and the world outside has shrunk to the flickering ring of candlelight and the thick shadows beyond. There are moments, brief and sharp, when you fear you have already begun to disappear. The servants speak about you in the third person, as if you are not truly present. The council meets without you, making decisions you are too weak to contest. Your family lingers at the threshold, hesitant to intrude on a grief that has not yet arrived. Even the priests, with their promises of mercy and redemption, look at you with a mixture of pity and impatience. You cling in these hours to the rituals that once defined you, the evening prayers, the muttered exchanges with your old tutor, the steady rhythm of a hand on your shoulder as the last candle is snuffed. These are small anchors, reminders that you are still, for now, a king, even as the night closes in. Yet the irony is inescapable. For all the power you once wielded, You are powerless against this darkness. The world is moving on, and you are being left behind, inch by inch, as surely as the shadows gather at your bed. There is a peculiar kind of loneliness that seeps in, even when the chamber is crowded with the quiet, bustling presence of servants, physicians, and priests. It is the loneliness of knowing that those you love most are drifting further from you with each passing day. Once, your rooms were filled with laughter, children racing across the carpets, your wife's voice rising above the babble, the comfortable noise of a household at ease. Now, silence reigns, broken only by the muffled footfalls of those who remain. At first, your family visited daily, almost dutifully. Your wife, whose strength and patience carried the household through more than one crisis, would arrive in the mornings with a careful smile, her eyes searching your face for any sign of improvement. She would ask after your comfort, offer you her hand, sometimes sit beside you for hours while the business of the court waited outside. The children came too, their faces solemn, their manners rehearsed for the sick room, a place of whispers and boundaries, a world apart from the gardens and galleries they once roamed freely. But as the weeks dragged on, as your condition stubbornly refused either to improve or to end, the visits grew shorter, less frequent. Your wife's questions became more formal, her touch lighter. She would come in the evenings now, sitting quietly at your side, but rarely meeting your gaze, her words carefully chosen and tinged with exhaustion. You know she loves you, or at least remembers loving you, but there is a distance in her now, a wall built not of anger or blame, but of helplessness and dread. The children, once eager to please, now approach your bed with the wary hesitance of strangers. Their eyes flick from your face to the floor, to the window, anywhere but to the sores and blotches that mark the passing of your days. When they speak, their voices are thin, as though afraid that too much sound might shatter the fragile peace of your chamber. Sometimes they stand in the doorway, half in shadow, waiting for someone to tell them what to do. You long to call them closer, to reassure them, but the words catch in your throat. You do not want them to remember you this way. You cannot blame them. You remember the shame you felt as a child, watching your own father's decline, the sense of embarrassment, of wishing to flee from the sight of weakness in a man who was supposed to be invincible. There is a cruelty in illness, not just in the pain and indignity it inflicts, but in the way it isolates you from those you need most. You become a living reminder of everything they fear: decay, dependency, the slow approach of death. It is easier, you suppose, for them to keep their distance, to remember you as you were rather than as you are. There are days when the chamber is so quiet you almost believe you are alone. The servants move through their tasks with practiced discretion. The physicians speak in hushed tones, and your family's absence echoes louder than any noise. You try not to resent them. You know that grief begins long before the last breath, that they are mourning you already in small, silent ways. Still, there is a sting to their withdrawal, a sense of abandonment that no logic can ease. At times, you imagine calling them back, insisting they sit with you forcing a last gathering before the inevitable end. But pride and mercy hold you back. You do not want their last memories to be of a man so diminished, so changed by pain and illness. It is a bitter comfort, but you cling to it. Better to be mourned in absence than pitied in presence. Instead, you find solace in small things. The distant sound of children's laughter drifting through the window, the faint scent of your wife's perfume lingering on a scarf left behind, the memory of a hand squeezing yours in the darkness. These remnants of family life are enough, sometimes, to keep the worst of the loneliness at bay. You remind yourself that love is not always loud or visible. It endures, even in silence. You wonder occasionally if things might have been different had you been a gentler man, a more patient father, a less distant husband. Illness is a harsh teacher, quick to expose old regrets and unspoken words. But this is not the time for repentance, nor for rewriting the past. You know, as all dying men must, that you are the sum of your choices and the victim of your body's betrayals. At night, when the darkness presses close and the ache in your bones becomes almost unbearable, you imagine your family gathered beyond the walls, living on in a world you no longer belong to. You hope they will remember the best of you, the laughter, the stories, the strength that once held the household together. It is not much to ask, you think, but it is all that remains. If there is any comfort in this slow withdrawal, it is that you are spared the daily burden of pretending to be strong, pretending not to see the sorrow in their eyes, pretending that tomorrow might be different. The mask of kingship is heavy, but the mask of fatherhood is heavier still when you cannot protect those you love from the sight of your own undoing. You close your eyes and let the memories come. The garden in spring, the echo of children's laughter, the warmth of your wife's hand in yours. These are the treasures you cling to now, fragile as candlelight in a darkened room. You used to pray with the confident cadence of a king, sure that each word carried the weight of your office and the promise of divine favor. You remember kneeling in the chapel, the stained glass throwing patches of red and gold across the stone, your voice rising with the others in perfect harmony. There was a time when faith was as much a part of your armor as your sword or your crown. Something worn, perhaps, but solid, reliable, endlessly reassuring. Now you pray because it is expected, because the priest comes in the evening with his book and his solemn voice, and because everyone agrees that a dying king should seek comfort in the rituals of the church. You mouth the words with the same hollow determination you bring to eating your daily broth, your lips forming petitions for mercy, for healing, for forgiveness. The phrases fall from your tongue with no conviction, no hope. They are the prayers of a man who has been too long in pain, too long in the shadow of death. You do not know if you are still capable of believing. Your mind is clouded by fever and exhaustion, your heart hollowed by the slow betrayal of your own body. The certainties that once guided you, God's justice, the righteousness of your cause, the promise of life after death, feel distant and abstract, as if they belong to someone else entirely. You watch the priest's lips move, listen to his gentle exhortations, to trust in divine grace, and all you feel is a deep, aching weariness. You try, in the darkness after he is gone, to muster the courage to pray for yourself. The words stumble and falter. Forgive me, you begin, and then stop, unable to say for what. For usurpation, for ambition, for failing those who depended on you. The list is endless, the wrongs both real and imagined. You find yourself bargaining in the old way. If only you might be spared a little longer. If only the pain would ease. If only you could be certain your soul was safe. Each bargain feels more desperate than the last. Each silence more condemning. You wonder if your illness is a punishment, the natural consequence of deeds you once excused in the name of necessity. The chroniclers will write their own stories, of course. They will debate whether your suffering is divine justice, poetic irony, or simply the random cruelty of nature. You are left to weigh your own soul in the silence, searching for meaning in the slow decay of your flesh. There are moments, late at night, when you almost believe you feel the presence of something greater. A shift in the air, a whisper on the edge of hearing, a fleeting sense of peace that dissolves as soon as you try to grasp it. Perhaps this is what the priests mean by grace, a comfort so fragile it can only be glimpsed, never held. Or perhaps it is nothing at all, a trick of the mind, eager for relief, inventing solace in the absence of answers. The priests, for their part, seem undisturbed by your doubts. They come with their prayers and their reassurances, certain that the soul of a king is a matter of public record, easily accounted for. They remind you of the rituals that must be observed: confession, absolution, the final rites. You submit to each in turn, half out of habit, half out of fear. It is a relief, in a way, to have someone else take charge, to surrender the burden of decision even in your faith. Yet the irony does not escape you. For all your years of power, for all your command over the fates of others, you are as helpless as any peasant in the face of eternity. The prayers of kings are no louder, no more likely to be answered than those whispered in the darkness by beggars and thieves. You find a grim humor in it. Stripped of your titles and your armies, you are nothing more than another soul waiting for judgment, hoping for mercy. You think sometimes of Richard, the king you deposed, whose memory haunts the edges of your conscience. Did he find peace in his final days? Did he curse you, or forgive you, or simply slip away into the same uncertain darkness that now surrounds you? You suspect you will never know. The past is a closed book, and the future is a door you are not yet ready to open. You wonder if, after all, salvation is possible, if a lifetime of ambition and compromise can be outweighed by a few moments of honest contrition. The priests insist it can, that God's mercy is infinite, but you cannot shake the suspicion that forgiveness, like health, is something that slips through your fingers just when you need it most. Sometimes you think the greatest sin is not the things you have done, but the things you have left undone, the moments when you could have been kinder, braver, wiser, but chose instead the easier path. You know these thoughts are not unique. Every dying man, you suspect, rehearses the same litany of regrets. Still, They sting in the quiet after the last prayer has been said and the chamber is empty save for the guttering candles. You find yourself speaking to the darkness, not as a king or a penitent, but simply as a man. You ask for peace, for rest, for some assurance that what you have suffered has meaning. The darkness offers no answers, but it does not judge you either. You find a strange comfort in that. And so you pray, not with hope, but with the stubbornness of habit. You recite the old words, let them fill the silence and wait for the dawn, unsure whether you are seeking forgiveness or simply the strength to face another day. You wake before dawn, the familiar weight of exhaustion pressing you into the mattress. The world is still, save for the occasional creak of wood or the faint, far off bell that signals another cold hour passing. You try to shift your position, and the effort leaves you breathless, your joints grinding with protest. Where once your body answered every command with strength and certainty, now it rebels at the smallest task. There is no position comfortable enough, no hour quiet enough, no servant gentle enough. The mornings are the hardest. Sleep, when it comes, is fitful, a collection of half remembered dreams that leave you more weary than before. You open your eyes and, for a moment, imagine you have been reborn into another life, a life without pain, without the thick taste of sickness in your mouth. But the illusion vanishes as quickly as it forms. You are still here, still king, still prisoner of a body that will not obey. Your limbs feel heavy, as if you are wearing invisible chains. The swelling in your joints has worsened, each knuckle an island of pain, each elbow and knee a source of ceaseless ache. You try to stretch your legs beneath the covers, but the effort is too much. Even your hands, those instruments of royal authority, have grown stiff and useless. When a servant brings your writing desk, you stare at the quill and parchment, knowing you will not write a single line. The days of signing decrees, of scratching out orders in your own sharp hand, are over. The business of the kingdom is conducted by others now, in voices pitched just low enough to exclude you. Sometimes you overhear your physicians in the corridor, discussing you as if you are already gone. They argue about the nature of your malady, debate the merits of leeches versus purgatives, recount the failures of yesterday's treatments. He was strong once, you hear one murmur, a warrior in his youth. Their voices fade, but the words linger. Was once. Every sentence about you is in the past tense, as if you are a relic to be catalogued rather than a man to be healed. Your courtiers, too, have grown bold in your absence. Decisions are made in council chambers where your presence is no longer required. They visit you with reports, but you see the impatience in their eyes, the restless shift of feet that betrays their desire to be anywhere but here. Some bring petitions, hoping for the faintest echo of your former authority, a nod, a murmured assent. Others come to measure your decline, to see with their own eyes whether the end is near. You recognize the look. You wore it yourself once, visiting the sick beds of those whose power you intended to inherit. It is a peculiar thing to watch your own life recede into rumor and memory. The stories that circulate in the halls are no longer your stories. They belong to the people who tell them. You hear conflicting accounts of your youth. One day you are the hero of Shrewsbury, the next, a usurper whose reign brought nothing but turmoil. The truth, whatever it was, is lost in the retelling. You are no longer the author of your own legend. Your servants, for their part, are careful and respectful, but there is a new formality in their manner. They speak in practiced tones, recite the old courtesies, but avoid your eyes. You are not certain whether they are embarrassed for you or afraid of what they see. A king who cannot rise from his bed, who needs help even to turn onto his side. The business of bathing, once a private affair, has become another performance. They lift your arms, wash your ruined skin, change the linen with the precision of ritual. You thank them, as always, but your gratitude sounds hollow, even to your own ears. You are reminded, constantly, of how little control you have left. Even the simplest tasks must be negotiated, discussed, planned. The act of standing, so unremarkable once, is now an undertaking that requires two strong men and the assistance of a chair. You are carried from the bed to the window so you may look out at the world you once ruled. The effort leaves you sweating, your breath coming in short, ragged bursts. The view offers no consolation. The city beyond the glass is as indifferent to your suffering as the rain that patters on the panes. Your mind, at least, is mostly your own. You watch, you listen, you remember. The boundaries of your world have shrunk to the dimensions of a bed and the handful of people who dare to cross its threshold. Yet even memory is a double-edged sword. Some days, the faces of old friends flicker behind your eyelids, their voices sharp and clear, as if they stand beside you. Other days, the past is as foggy as the streets at dawn, each recollection slipping through your fingers before it can take shape. The physicians return, measuring your pulse, counting your breaths, debating whether today is the day to bleed you again. They prescribe new drafts, new poultices, new hopes. You endure it all with the patience of someone who knows the end is inevitable, who has learned that the performance of care is all that remains when the possibility of cure is gone. You wonder what will remain when you are gone. Will they speak of you kindly, or will your name be another cautionary tale, told to those who come after as a warning against pride and ambition? Will your victories be remembered, or only your decline? You would ask, but you know the answers do not belong to you. In the evenings, you listen to the sounds of the palace as they fade into night. The laughter of servants, the distant clatter of horses in the yard, the steady murmur of life continuing without you. It is a melancholy music, a reminder that the world will go on unmoved by your absence. You find in this knowledge a strange sort of peace. For all your efforts, all your struggles, you are, in the end, a man like any other, subject to the same frailties, the same forgettings, the same silent retreat into memory. The sickness has no sense of decorum. It announces itself in the most ordinary, most humiliating ways. A fresh stain on the sheets, the sluggish oozing of wounds that never close, the odor of suppurating flesh seeping into everything you touch. In the earliest days, you believed dignity might be preserved by sheer force of will, by clinging to old habits of cleanliness and order. You soon learned that illness cares nothing for dignity, nor for titles, nor even for the polite fictions of courtly life. Each morning, your body is a new catalog of indignities. A sore, once the size of a coin, now blooms across your shoulder in angry red and yellow, the skin puckered and hot to the touch. Another has split open behind your knee, leaving the sheets damp and foul smelling. Your chamber, despite the servant's endless scrubbing and the doctor's applications of vinegar and herbs, cannot escape the heavy, acrid scent that signals corruption beneath the skin. You have become, in your own bed, a source of revulsion, pitiable even to yourself. The doctors discuss your symptoms with professional detachment, their voices muffled behind cloths held to their noses. The rot is advancing, one mutters. Best to lance and drain it again. Perhaps a tincture of marigold will do. Another argues for yet more bleeding, insisting that the bad humors must be drawn out, as if your life is a matter of plumbing rather than mystery. They debate leeches, honey, the merits of hot stones versus cold compresses. You listen because you have no choice, but the words run together into a drone of false hope and weary routine. You are an object lesson now, a body to be prodded and observed. The servants, those same men and women who once fetched your armor, laced your boots, bowed at your approach, now strip the bed and carry away linens heavy with the stench of illness. They do so silently, their eyes fixed on the task, careful never to meet your gaze. Pity is an indulgence no one here can afford. Sometimes, when the doctors leave and the servants have finished their work, you lie in the aftermath and imagine what your chamber must look like to a stranger. The fading banners on the wall, the heavy velvet curtains drawn tight against the world, the perpetual clutter of bandages, jars of ointment, and discarded cloths. The candles struggle to mask the odor, their waxy sweetness mingling uselessly with the sickly air. You wonder, almost idly, if the room will ever be clean again, or if your presence has marked it forever. There are moments of clarity, usually in the quiet hours before dawn, when you catch yourself grieving not for the loss of power, nor for the betrayals and regrets of your reign, but for the simple loss of bodily control. You recall a time when the greatest indignity you suffered was a minor wound or the sting of cold water at bath. Now, pain is a constant companion, and embarrassment is merely the background to each day. The shame, oddly, is not that others must witness your decline, but that you must endure it yourself, fully conscious, unable to look away. Your skin, once ruddy and weathered from the sun, is now marked with the colors of illness, mottled purple and yellow, slick and shiny, or rough as tree bark. Your feet swell, your ankles disappear beneath layers of flesh gone soft and useless. The physicians prescribe endless changes of position, hoping to stave off the worst sores, but the bed itself feels as unforgiving as stone. Sometimes, as you lie awake, you imagine yourself becoming part of the furniture, dissolving into the stained linen and worn wood, your body nothing more than another object to be cleaned and carried away. It is not only the body that suffers, the mind too is besieged by the monotony of care, the rhythm of treatment and cleaning and whispered consultation. Your world has shrunk to the span of a mattress and the discipline of submission. You become an audience to your own demise, observing each fresh indignity with a detachment that feels, at times, almost merciful. The priests come often now, more for the comfort of others than for your own. They perform their rituals with solemnity, blessing the room and muttering prayers for healing and peace. You are grateful for their words, if only because they offer a break from the clamor of medicine and the smell of sickness. Sometimes you wish you believed more firmly in the promise of their comfort, but you have seen too many men die, too many promises broken to be entirely convinced. Still, you accept the holy water, the whispered assurances of forgiveness, and the sign of the cross pressed against your fevered brow. It is a strange thing to be both the center of attention and utterly alone. Each day brings a parade of faces, some curious, some anxious, some simply resigned. They come and go, adjusting your pillows, changing your dressings, reciting their lines in the quiet play of death. You respond with the courtesies expected of a king, but the effort is more than you care to admit. At times, you wish they would all leave you, take their hopes and fears and busy hands elsewhere, and let you slip into whatever peace might be found in solitude. Yet you are never truly alone. The illness is your constant companion, as faithful as any servant, as present as any courtier. It shapes your world, your days and nights, your every waking moment. And you, who once commanded armies and kingdoms, can do nothing now but endure it, waiting for the end with whatever patience you can muster. You wonder, in your more ironic moods, if this is the final lesson kings are meant to learn, that all power, all pageantry, all pride are stripped away in the end, leaving only the body and its needs. You cannot say you are grateful for the knowledge, but you accept it. Acceptance, after all, is the last dignity illness allows. Your sense of time becomes unreliable, a casualty of both fever and the monotony of your sick room. Hours stretch and shrink without reason. Days and nights bleed into each other until you lose track of where one ends and the next begins. Sometimes the candles have barely guttered before you drift again into uneasy sleep, waking moments later to the pale, watery light of another morning. At other times, the darkness outside your window lingers for what feels like eternity. The tick of the clock and the muffled sounds from distant halls, the only evidence that the world has not simply stopped. You have not left your bed in what must be weeks, though you could not swear to it. Each day brings the same routines, the same faces, the same cautious voices offering broth and medicine and encouragement, with the hollow cheer of actors repeating their lines for the thousandth time. You drift in and out of sleep, and even your dreams are tedious, shapeless wanderings through empty corridors, endless repetitions of old conversations, the ghosts of unfinished business. Your thoughts, once sharp and decisive, are now unreliable guides. They wander off on their own, doubling back, repeating themselves, dissolving in the fog of fever and exhaustion. You struggle to recall names, dates, even the faces of those who come to sit at your bedside. Sometimes you speak aloud, asking after people long dead or gone from court, and the servants answer carefully, as if soothing a child after a nightmare. It is in these moments, as your mind slides away from the present, that you feel most keenly the loss of self. You have always prided yourself on your memory, your ability to recall a face from a distant campaign or the precise wording of a treaty debated years ago. Now you cannot remember what you have eaten for breakfast or whether you have eaten at all. You find yourself uncertain even of the year, the season, the reason for your illness. Was it some curse, a wound, the ordinary cruelty of age? The facts slip from your grasp, leaving only confusion and a low, persistent anxiety. Reality itself seems thin, insubstantial. The world narrows to the four walls of your chamber, the damp sheets, the flicker of candlelight on the ceiling. The voices of those around you take on a dreamlike quality, words merging and distorting until they are no more real than the half remembered phrases of your fevered sleep. The line between dream and waking blurs, and you are never quite sure where you stand. Sometimes, in the rare clarity of early morning, you are struck by how small your world has become. You count the objects in your room, the chair by the fire, the battered trunk at the foot of the bed, the old tapestry on the far wall. These, you realize, are all that remains of the kingdom you once ruled. The distant thunder of politics, the weight of decisions, the clamor of court, all of it reduced to a handful of possessions and a circle of worried faces. Your body, too, is changing in ways you can neither follow nor control. Your muscles waste away beneath the skin, limbs growing thinner and weaker with each passing day. Even the smallest movements, lifting a hand, shifting your weight, reaching for the cup at your bedside, become exhausting labors. You feel yourself shrinking, not just in strength, but in presence, fading from the world by degrees. There are moments, brief and frightening, when you lose all sense of who or where you are. You wake in terror, convinced you are back in some childhood sick room, or worse, in the cold stone cellars of a castle conquered long ago. Your heart races, and your mind scrambles to catch hold of something real, something solid. A servant's voice, the touch of a cool cloth on your forehead, a familiar prayer whispered by a priest. These are the anchors that keep you from drifting entirely away. The servants and physicians treat you with increasing gentleness, as if afraid to disturb what little of you remains. They speak softly, move slowly, and never correct you when you mistake one for another or call out for someone who is not there. Their care is touching in its way, but you cannot help but resent the pity in their eyes. You have become, for them, less a king than a relic, something precious, fragile, and almost entirely removed from the world that goes on outside your door. You begin to see, with the clarity that comes at the edge of things, how easily a life can unravel. Ambition, power, reputation, none of it matters. in the slow, stifling fog of sickness. You try to recall the man you once were, to piece together the memories that defined you, but the effort is like trying to assemble a tapestry from threads scattered in the dark. You are left with fragments, a face glimpsed in torchlight, the thrill of victory, the chill of betrayal, the sound of your own laughter echoing down a long, emptied hall. The world outside your chamber continues on, heedless of your confusion. You catch snatches of conversation, rumors drifting through the open door, a harvest celebrated, a war brewing in the north, the marriage of a distant cousin. These events seem as remote to you as legends, things that belong to another life, another king. You feel yourself slipping further into irrelevance, even as the machinery of the kingdom continues to turn without your hand on the lever. At night, the dreams grow stranger, darker. You wander endless halls, seeking someone you cannot name, searching for something you cannot recall. Sometimes you glimpse your own reflection in a window or a pool of water, and the face that looks back is a stranger's, gaunt, hollow eyed, barely human. You wake from these dreams with a shudder, only to find the world around you no less surreal. There are moments of lucidity, rare and precious, when you remember yourself, a flash of anger, a surge of pride, the memory of a joke well told, or a battle well fought. In these instants, you feel almost alive, almost whole, but they pass quickly, swept away by the relentless tide of fatigue and confusion. You wonder how much longer you will remain yourself, or whether you have already begun to disappear, one thought at a time. You cling to routine, to the daily rituals that mark the passage of time, the prayers at dawn, the arrival of broth, the changing of dressings, the muttered reports from the council chamber. These are the threads that tie you to the present, the evidence that you have not yet been entirely forgotten. But even these rituals lose their shape, become mere gestures, repeated for habit's sake rather than any true hope of comfort or recovery. You find yourself waiting, though you are no longer sure for what, for healing, for death, for some word of forgiveness or closure. The hours pass in a haze, and all you can do is endure, holding on to whatever fragments of memory and self you can rescue from the slow, inevitable drift into darkness. The days might blur, the hours might slip into formlessness, but there are certain sounds that anchor you to the world outside your sick room. One of them is the rising murmur beneath your windows, voices not belonging to your attendants or the court, but to the city itself. It begins most mornings as a low, distant hum, almost lost amid the cawing of crows and the church bells tolling prime. By noon, the sound swells, a restless tide of people gathering beyond the palace walls. You do not see them, but you know they are there. Word spreads quickly in London. The king is dying. The king is improving. The king has been cured by some miraculous potion. The king is surely already dead. The truth, as ever, is less dramatic and far less satisfying. An unending parade of neither life nor death, just the slow, relentless diminishing of a man behind stone and tapestry. And so they come, compelled by curiosity, by hope, by dread. There are prayers among them, certainly. You can imagine the priests leading the faithful in their careful Latin, voices as thin and bright as a spring wind. Some pray for your recovery, more perhaps for your swift release from suffering, and a few, though no one says it aloud, for the orderly succession of power that will allow daily life to resume without fear or famine. There are always those who prefer certainty, even when it means the end of a reign. From your window, you can sometimes make out the edges of the crowd. On clearer afternoons, when the wind shifts and the light finds its way past the curtains, you catch glimpses, a mass of faces pressed together, men and women in rough cloaks, children hoisted onto shoulders, the occasional flash of a soldier's steel. Some bear candles or crude painted images, others nothing but their open, expectant faces. You have become a spectacle, a cautionary tale, a rumor in flesh. Even your agony is no longer private. The city wants a resolution. Every cough, every flicker of candlelight, every movement behind the glass becomes fodder for speculation. You hear the stories. The king is possessed. The king is being poisoned. The king's illness is a sign that God favors another house. You imagine the lords and merchants, the innkeepers and street hawkers, passing these tales along with mugs of ale and loaves of bread, each story gaining color as it travels. Once, your actions changed the fate of England. Now, your condition changes the price of wheat in the market. You should not care. A king's suffering is supposed to be a matter of state, a tragedy for his family, a matter for priests and physicians, not the idle entertainment of the masses. But you find yourself thinking about them in the silence of your room, the old woman who lights a candle and whispers your name, the merchant hoping for a fresh start under a new regime, the scribe sharpening his quill to record your final words, though you have none left to give. It is a strange thing to be so desperately needed and so thoroughly unwanted at the same time. The city mourns for you and hopes for your passing in the same breath. You have become a problem to be solved. The realm waits for a new day, a new king, a new chapter, but you refuse to turn the page quickly enough for their liking. Even in your dying, you find yourself at odds with the will of the people. Inside the palace, the mood mirrors that of the city, but is quieter, more dangerous. Courtiers walk with a careful urgency, as though each decision, each word, must be weighed for the ears of whoever might rule next. Council meetings are short, efficient, and full of silences. No one wishes to appear too eager, too hopeful, too prepared. There are whispers in corners, glances exchanged over ledgers and wine cups. You recognize ambition when you see it. You once felt it burning in your own veins. Now, it makes you tired. You notice the small changes first. Letters arrive less frequently. Reports are delivered by lower ranking officials. The great lords spend more time in their own estates. Your inner circle is shrinking, either by choice or by necessity. You understand. Death, like power, is a lonely business. Still, the withdrawal stings. It is the world's way of rehearsing your absence. The physicians try to shield you from news of the city's impatience, but even they cannot hide the truth. You overhear them whispering, "The people are restless, the council divided, the succession uncertain." They speak of crowds in the streets, prayers at the abbey, the possibility of riot or rebellion if you linger too long. Your life, once the axis of England, has become a bottleneck, a point of tension that no one can resolve except by your passing. You find yourself resenting not the pain or the indignity, but the pressure to perform even in your final days. You are expected to die well, as you once ruled well, to provide closure and stability for those who survive you. It is not enough to endure suffering. You must do so with grace, with patience, with an eye toward the needs of others. You wonder sometimes if there is any part of you left that belongs solely to yourself. At night, the city quiets, but the pressure remains. The crowds thin, but do not disperse. Some keep vigil, others simply refuse to go home until the story finds its ending. You listen to the distant noise and feel yourself shrinking, not just as a king, but as a person. You have become an event, a milestone, a moment to be marked and moved past. In your more generous moments, you pity them, the citizens who look to you for signs and omens, who hope for a resolution to their own uncertainties. You know what it is to wait for change, to hunger for certainty, but mostly you are weary. You want to slip quietly from the stage, to let the story end on your own terms. But even this final choice is denied you, and so you linger, suspended between life and death, presence and absence, king and memory. The city waits, and you wait with it, both of you yearning for something neither is permitted to command, a simple, merciful ending. Night falls with a heaviness that no number of candles can dispel. The world beyond your chamber recedes into silence, punctuated only by the distant groan of ancient timbers and the rhythmic drip of melting wax. It is in these hours that the boundaries of your mind grow thin and the darkness presses closer, seeping beneath your eyelids with the persistence of water finding every crack in a stone. You are not alone in the night. Sleep, when it comes, is fickle, more a fugitive hiding behind fevered dreams than a true rest. Your mind is restless, wandering through memories and imaginings, assembling scenes from scraps of the past and anxieties about the future. Faces drift in and out of focus, some beloved, others despised. Their voices rise in chorus, sometimes gentle, sometimes accusatory, always insistent. There are old friends among them, comrades who once stood at your side in rain soaked camps, who laughed with you around smoky fires, who fell before their time on distant fields. They come to you in flashes, a hand clapped to your shoulder, a rough joke, the scent of horses and sweat. You remember the heat of battle, the taste of victory, the comfort of loyalty freely given. Then, just as suddenly, these friendly ghosts turn away, swallowed by the shadows. Enemies visit you too, as bold in death as they ever were in life. Richard appears most often, his gaze steady, neither reproachful nor forgiving. Sometimes he says nothing at all, merely stands at the foot of your bed, his presence as heavy as a crown. On other nights, His voice fills the room with quiet questions. Did you regret? Did you waver? Did you ever fear the reckoning that must follow a stolen throne? You answer in whispers, or not at all. The answers matter less than the fact that you are compelled to speak them. Others come, rivals, traitors, men whose names you thought forgotten. You see their faces flickering by the candlelight, hear their voices mingling with the crackle of the fire and the creak of the rafters. Sometimes the room is crowded with them, a parliament of the dead, each eager to claim a piece of your attention. They bring with them old arguments, unsettled debts, the ache of unresolved wrongs. They debate your choices as if the verdict still hangs in the balance, as if you could yet change the ending of your story by sheer force of will. The line between waking and dreaming grows thin. You speak aloud, not always sure whether you address the living or the dead. Your attendants, tiptoeing through their nightly duties, are careful not to interrupt these one sided conversations. You hear yourself calling out names, apologizing, defending, accusing, confessing sins both real and imagined. The fever makes your tongue clumsy, your words slurred, but the compulsion to speak is stronger than the shame. There are moments of terror, too, dreams that curdle into nightmares. You wander endless corridors, always searching for someone you cannot find. The palace is transformed, walls close in, doors vanish, voices echo and multiply until you are lost in a labyrinth of your own making. You see your children running ahead, their laughter distant and cold, your wife's face turned away from you. You reach out but cannot touch them. The sense of loss is as sharp as any pain your body has inflicted. Sometimes you see yourself, not as you are, but as you once were, strong, vibrant, quick with laughter, unburdened by regret. The contrast is unbearable, and you wake with a gasp, clutching at sheets soaked through with sweat. For a moment, you do not recognize your own hands, thin, spotted, trembling in the candlelight. The shame is overwhelming, a weight that presses the breath from your lungs. In the rare intervals of clarity, you are almost amused by the spectacle of your own undoing. You, who once commanded men with a glance, now held captive by ghosts and shadows. You, who once feared nothing but defeat, now dreading the long, formless hours of the night. The irony is bitter, but not without a trace of humor. Even in this, you remain a king, surrounded by courtiers, though they belong to another realm. Your mind returns, again and again, to questions of forgiveness. You ask the shades for it, though you doubt they have the power to grant it. You rehearse speeches you wish you had given, letters you wish you had written, decisions you wish you had made differently. In the darkness, everything seems possible: reconciliation, redemption, a last minute reprieve. When the sun rises, these hopes dissolve with the shadows, leaving only the same gray fatigue. The priests tell you that this is the soul preparing for judgment, that these visitations are signs of grace, a final opportunity to make peace before the end. You are not convinced. It feels more like the mind's final rebellion against the prison of the body, a desperate attempt to finish the stories left incomplete. Still, you cling to the rituals, the whispered prayers, the gestures of contrition, the hope that someone, somewhere, is listening. You wait for dawn, longing for the meager comfort of daylight, for the return of routine, and the gentle chatter of servants. The city outside stirs and stretches, oblivious to the dramas played out in your lonely chamber. You are left with your ghosts, your regrets, your unanswered questions. Morning comes, thin and cold, and with it a new day of slow decline. You are grateful in a strange way for the exhaustion that follows a night of fevered visions. It dulls the edges of memory, quiets the voices, leaves you just weary enough to endure another round of ministrations, another cycle of hope and disappointment. And so the pattern continues: darkness, delirium, the endless replay of what was and what might have been. You are a king beset by ghosts, a ruler of shadows, the only court left to you as the world outside prepares to move on. The remedies become rituals, repeated not out of hope, but out of habit. Your physicians, having exhausted their store of certainty, offer bloodletting once more. It is a ritual almost as old as kingship itself, a ceremony performed with the solemnity of a sacrament and the grim confidence of men who have little left to offer but tradition. You no longer protest. The effort it would take to refuse, to argue, to demand an alternative seems too great. You are past the point of caring whether this is the time it finally helps or the time it tips you into oblivion. You simply close your eyes and offer your arm, feeling the cold press of metal against your skin, the practiced hands tightening a leather band above your elbow. The physician murmurs instructions to his apprentice, the words familiar and meaningless, and you drift on the edge of awareness, listening to the muted splatter of blood into a shallow basin. It hurts, of course, but pain has become so constant that you barely notice its variations. The sharp sting of the lancet is followed by the dull, spreading ache that comes with every new wound. Your head swims, your mouth goes dry, and your thoughts begin to unravel, tugged in a dozen directions by fatigue and the slow, steady loss of blood. You feel as though you are being unspooled, a skein of thread winding down to nothing. When it is finished, the physician binds your arm, offers a cup of watered wine, and nods gravely as if some great work has been accomplished. He will record the date and hour, the amount of blood drawn, the color and consistency, as though this record keeping can ward off the truth. The apprentice wipes down the basin, careful not to spill a drop, and both men retreat to the corner of the room, whispering about the efficacy of the treatment and whether another session might be advisable in a day or two. You are left shivering, wrapped in blankets that do nothing to chase away the chill that has settled in your bones. The servants move about quietly, changing your linens, offering small comforts, tidying the remnants of yet another failed attempt at healing. You feel curiously light, as if your substance is draining away, not just in blood, but in strength, memory, purpose. It occurs to you, with a flicker of dark amusement, that you are the most thoroughly studied man in the kingdom, poked, prodded, and drained in the name of science, superstition, and hope. Once, Men watched you for your power and cunning. Now they watch for the color of your phlegm and the heat of your brow. You have become a lesson for apprentices, a story to be told in lecture halls, the slow, public unraveling of a king. You fall asleep for a time, or at least drift into a state that is neither wakefulness nor true rest. Your dreams are thin, colorless, filled with fragments of conversation, flashes of memory, the rhythmic chant of the priest at your bedside. You see the faces of your family, blurred and distant, reaching out for you, but always just beyond your grasp. You hear your name repeated again and again, sometimes as a prayer, sometimes as a warning. You awaken to the familiar heaviness in your limbs, the persistent ache in your chest, the dull throb at the sight of the bloodletting. The room is unchanged, save for the fresh bowl of broth on the table and the subtle rearrangement of your pillows. It is a new day, or perhaps merely another extension of the same endless afternoon. The routine resumes: broth, medicines, the quiet murmur of the servants, the distant tolling of bells. You find yourself wishing, at times, that the remedies would simply cease, that the doctors would admit defeat, that the rituals would end, that you might be left alone to slip quietly into whatever comes next. But you know that is not the way of things. A king's dying is not a private affair, and every new intervention is another opportunity for hope, for talk, for delay. No one wants to be the one who gave up. No one wishes to explain to the court, to your family, to history itself, that the last and best thing left to offer was nothing. The irony does not escape you. For all the power you once wielded, all the decisions that shaped the fate of nations, you are powerless in the face of well-meaning care. You endure because that is what is required of you. You are a symbol now, not a man, a vessel into which others pour their hopes, fears, and ambitions. If there is dignity in this, it is a bitter, reluctant dignity, earned by submission rather than strength. You watch the daylight fade, feeling the ache in your arm, the cool sweat on your brow, the weight of another failed cure pressing down on you. The physicians will return, of course, with new theories and older remedies, convinced that salvation lies just one treatment further on. The priests will come with prayers and promises. Your family may visit, bringing their mixture of hope and dread. The city will wait, restless, for word of your condition. You lie still, listening to the sounds of the palace, the soft click of heels on flagstones, the hush of voices in the corridor, the distant cry of a newborn somewhere in the servants' quarters. Life continues, indifferent to your struggle, untroubled by your decline. You close your eyes, surrendering to the rhythm of your breath, and for a moment, you allow yourself to hope for nothing at all. This, you realize, is the last lesson of suffering, that there is a kind of peace in letting go, in allowing the world to turn without you, in becoming nothing more than a fading presence at the edge of your own life. Pain wakes you before the daylight does. There is no single, sharp agony, no drama worthy of a ballad or chronicle, only the ceaseless, grinding ache that radiates from every joint, every muscle, every ruined patch of skin. You have long since ceased to measure your suffering in degrees. It is simply a fact of existence, a flavor in the air, as constant as the ticking of the clock on the mantle. Breathing is labor. Each breath is shallow and uncertain, your chest rising with effort, the air rasping through your throat as if it too resists this final work. You feel the familiar rawness in your mouth, the taste of old blood and stale medicine. Your lips crack, and when you try to speak, your voice is barely more than a whisper. It is enough. There is nothing left to say that has not already been said, no comfort or complaint that has not already been offered and acknowledged. You become aware, in the way that the dying do, that you are no longer the center of anyone's world. Your attendants move about you as quietly as ghosts, their movements efficient and gentle. They speak to one another in low tones, careful not to disturb your thin grip on consciousness. Their concern is genuine, but no longer urgent. They have grown accustomed to this slow dying, as one becomes accustomed to the fading of summer or the shortening of days. You close your eyes and drift, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for hours. Time no longer has shape or meaning. You wake from dreams that dissolve as soon as you open your eyes. Faces you once loved, places you once ruled, all washed away by the tide of pain and exhaustion. The world outside your room is a memory, its sounds and smells reduced to the faintest echoes. Sometimes you think you hear the murmur of prayers, the soft cadence of a priest reciting the words that have been spoken over so many dying men before you. The comfort of ritual is not lost on you, but it is not enough to drive away the cold that settles in your bones. You listen, letting the words wash over you, not bothering to mouth them in reply. Your body betrays you in new ways every day. The wounds ooze and crust. Your skin stretches thin and shiny across swollen joints. There are new pains, deep, twisting aches in your belly, a burning in your chest, a sudden dizziness that comes and goes with no warning. You learn to recognize the steps of your physicians before they enter the room, the scrape of the stool as they sit beside you, the tone of their voices as they check your pulse and your breath and your eyes. They do not speak of recovery now. They only offer comfort, or what passes for it. A strange peace creeps in as your body weakens further. The fear that once kept you awake, the terror of suffocation, of madness, of pain beyond endurance, recedes as you realize that these are no longer things to be fought. You find that you do not dread the end, not anymore. You are simply tired, and the thought of release has become as appealing as the prospect of sleep after a long, difficult day. You remember stories told to you as a child of saints who met death with joy, who saw visions of angels as their souls departed. You do not expect such comfort. The world has grown smaller and smaller until it contains only the sound of your own heart, the feel of sheets against your skin, the dull ache of your body at war with itself. You have not become wise or saintly. You have simply run out of resistance. There is a final indignity in being so completely dependent. You cannot move without help, cannot even turn your head to see the world beyond the narrow frame of your pillow. You are washed and fed by others, your voice reduced to requests for water or relief from pain. Even the priests who come to administer the last rites look past you, as if searching for the man you once were, the king they remember, and not the body that remains. You do not blame them. You too find it hard to remember the man who once rode at the head of an army, who spoke with conviction and certainty, who believed in the rightness of his cause and the security of his reign. Those memories are soft at the edges now, blurred by fever and fatigue, and you have neither the strength nor the will to hold on to them. You let them go, one by one, as if surrendering possessions no longer needed for a journey you have already begun. Outside, the world continues. You hear it in the distant clatter of horse hooves on cobblestones, the clang of bells from the abbey, the laughter of servants far down the hall. These sounds belong to the living, to the future. You find you are not jealous of them. You are past envy, past longing, past even regret. As night falls, you sense a subtle change in the room. The air thickens, the light dims, and the rhythm of your breath becomes more labored, more uncertain. The priest returns, offering a prayer for the dying, his voice steady and calm. Your attendants stand in silence, their faces pale and solemn. You meet their eyes, and for the first time in many weeks, you feel a flicker of gratitude for their patience, for their care, for their willingness to remain with you as the last hours pass. You do not pray for a miracle, nor for forgiveness, nor for a second chance. You pray, if you pray at all, for a gentle end, a sigh, a fading, a slipping away that will leave behind only a memory and a story. It is not heroism, nor tragedy, nor martyrdom. It is simply the last, quiet act of being human. In this final vigil, you do not fight, you surrender. There is a relief in it, a softness, a letting go that is neither bitter nor sweet, but simply necessary. You listen to the sound of your own breath, the hush of feet on the floor, the soft words of prayer, and you wait for the moment when waiting is no longer required. The morning brings neither pain nor comfort, just a hollow neutrality, as if your body, having spent itself in suffering, is now little more than an afterthought. It is the beginning of your last day, though you do not know it, and there is nothing momentous about the dawn. The sky is a flat, indifferent gray. The light that seeps through the drapes offers no warmth, no promise of renewal. Even the birds outside, whose calls have marked so many empty hours, are silent. You are not alone, not technically. The priest is present, hunched over his book in the dim light, lips moving as he reads prayers you no longer attempt to follow. A servant moves about with practiced quiet, smoothing the sheets, arranging the pillows, changing out a bowl of water for another that will soon be stained and tepid. But you feel the profound aloneness that comes when the living are already half in mourning and the dying are halfway elsewhere. The world has become muffled, distant. Words reach you as if spoken through water, and when you try to reply, your voice fails, rasping and small. The faces around you swim at the edges of your vision, sometimes familiar, sometimes the masks of strangers. You wonder if your mind is failing at last, or if the world itself has grown too thin to support its burdens. You have not eaten since yesterday. The servants have stopped offering food, and the doctors have long abandoned any talk of broth or tinctures. You do not miss these things. Hunger left you days ago, replaced by a vague ache that is neither desire nor discomfort, just another absence among so many. You do not thirst, though you are vaguely aware of a cup pressed to your lips from time to time, cool water trickling down your chin. You are past all appetites. The body is doing the final work of letting go, discarding the needs that once defined its days. You sense, as the hours pass, the careful rhythm of those who attend you. The priest murmurs prayers for the departing soul, invoking saints and angels to guard your passage. He makes the sign of the cross on your brow, his fingers cool and certain. The servant lights a fresh candle, its flame a pale echo of the sun. At some point, your wife appears at your side, her hand resting lightly atop yours. She does not speak, nor do you. The language of the dying is silence. Your children come, one by one, their faces drawn with worry and fatigue. They sit for a while, each lost in private thoughts. You sense the distance in them, the gap between memory and reality, love and loss. They are preparing themselves, or perhaps they are simply waiting, caught between duty and dread. You want to reassure them, but your mind is sluggish, your lips unresponsive. You hope, irrationally, that they will remember something kinder than these last wasted days. There are moments when you slip beneath the surface of waking, drifting through memories that feel more real than the chamber around you. You walk again in sunlight, ride out beneath banners, laugh in a hall filled with music and voices. You feel the wind against your face, the solid weight of a sword in your hand, the certainty of youth and power. These visions do not bring comfort, only a faint, aching regret. They are not promises, but farewells. The pain, which once circled you like a pack of hounds, has ebbed into dullness. Your limbs are heavy, your chest tight, but there is no longer any sense of battle. You are aware of your breath, slow and shallow, each exhale a little softer than the one before. The world grows quieter, the voices fading, the touch of hands less frequent and less real. You notice the light in the room changing, the candle flickering low. You hear snatches of prayers, the gentle sobbing of someone, perhaps your wife, perhaps a servant. These sounds are far away. You are past the need for comfort, past the urge for reassurance. You are slipping, gently, into that nameless place where pain and memory are nothing more than echoes. For a moment, you sense the presence of others, your father, perhaps, or old friends gone before. There is no fear in this. They do not beckon, do not accuse or embrace. They are simply there, part of the silence that gathers around you. The priest's voice rises and falls, calling you home or sending you on your way. You are not sure it matters which. You find yourself wanting nothing, not peace, not forgiveness, not even release. You simply want to rest. You are tired beyond telling. Your mind drifts, unmoored, and you feel yourself receding from the world like a tide going out. The sounds of the palace, bells, footsteps, voices, are now distant and indistinct, the ordinary business of life continuing without you. Your breath falters, slows, catches in your throat. You sense the worry in those around you, but it seems to come from another world. There is only this, a vast, gentle darkness, a fading of sensation, the loosening of all ties. You surrender to it, not with relief, not with fear, but with the weary acceptance of one who has reached the end of a long and difficult road. And so your last day passes, not with drama or revelation, but with the slow, quiet dissolution of everything that made you king or man or self. The world waits, as it always has, indifferent and patient, and you wait with it until even waiting ceases. Death comes, as you always suspected it would, not with a thunderclap or a vision of angels, but with a slow, almost imperceptible retreat. The world, never particularly invested in your struggles, shrinks to the size of your own chest, to the thin thread of your breathing, to the pulse that flickers at your wrist and then falters. You are not aware of the precise moment when you cross the threshold. There is no sudden rupture, no blinding light. Instead, there is a long, slow dimming, a softening of edges, a thinning of sound, a gentle blurring of pain into a background hum. The faces at your bedside recede, their voices falling to whispers, their movements growing slower as if underwater. Your wife's hand slips from yours, or perhaps it is your fingers that loosen their grip. You want to thank her, to say something wise or loving or simply human, but your tongue is heavy and your thoughts scatter before they can become words. Your children, gathered nearby, are motionless and silent, holding themselves tight, as if afraid that any sound might draw you back for another moment of suffering. You hear the priest reciting the prayers for the departing soul, his voice steady and practiced, and you realize with a fleeting touch of irony that you are no longer the king, nor even the patient, but the occasion, the reason for ritual, the excuse for solemnity. You drift, awareness flickering in and out. There are fragments of sensation, the coolness of the linen beneath your cheek, the faint scent of candle wax, the pressure of a hand against your brow. There are fragments of memory, too, glimpses of sunlight on armor, laughter around a table, the sound of your own voice echoing in a hall now long silent. These images come and go, unmoored from chronology, detached from meaning. They are simply there, the remnants of a life being slowly folded away. The end is neither terror nor ecstasy. It is a gentle confusion, a giving up of names and faces, a slipping away from the need for thought or will. Your body, so long a battlefield, gives one last shudder, and you feel the world letting go of you as much as you are letting go of it. Your heart, which has carried you through triumph and despair, finally decides it has had enough. Around you, the chamber holds its breath. There is a hush, a space where the living wait for confirmation that what they have feared and expected has finally come to pass. The priest finishes his prayer, closes his book, and makes the sign of the cross over your still body. Someone weeps softly. Someone else draws the curtains, as if protecting you from the brightness of a world you no longer inhabit. The servants know what must be done. There is a flurry of discreet, practiced activity. The body of the king must be washed and prepared, the chamber tidied, the mess and odor of sickness banished as quickly as possible. The windows are opened, just a crack, to let in air that feels suddenly sharper and cleaner. The bedding is stripped away, the sheets bundled for burning or scrubbing, the last evidence of pain and failure removed. The ritual of death is as old as the palace itself, and everyone has a part to play. News spreads quickly through the corridors. The king is dead. The king is at peace. The king has left this world for the next, as all kings must. Voices drop in reverence, then rise again in speculation. Already the future takes shape in a dozen whispered plans and calculations. The court gathers, not to mourn, but to witness and to survive. Your family lingers a little longer. Your wife leans close, whispering a final farewell, her words meant more for herself than for you. Your children approach in turn, their faces blurred by tears and exhaustion, touching your hand or cheek in a gesture as ancient as grief. They leave behind a hush, a pause before the machinery of succession begins its inexorable turning. The priest lingers for a moment, muttering another prayer, his gaze lingering on your face. Does he wonder you imagine what it is like to pass from one world to the next? Does he believe truly that your soul is now at rest? You suspect he has seen enough deaths to know that each is different, each both an ending and a question without answer. The world outside your chamber continues. Bells toll in the abbey. The crowds that once waited for news of your condition now wait for the confirmation of your passing. Some pray for your soul, some rejoice for what your death might mean. Most simply return to their routines, their lives only briefly altered by the fact of your absence. And you, what remains of you, are nowhere in particular. You have joined the long procession of the dead, the endless line of kings and commoners alike, your story reduced to a date, a cause, a list of titles. Perhaps, somewhere in the darkness, there is peace. Perhaps there is nothing. You have no way of knowing, and, at last, no reason to care. For those who stay behind, the day resumes. Your name is spoken one final time, and then the silence of your chamber is filled with the beginnings of new stories, new fears, new ambitions. Your reign is over, your suffering ended, and history, as it always does, prepares to move on. Your body, which carried so many burdens, is removed from the chamber almost gently, as if your soul might still be lingering somewhere in the folds of the soiled linens or the heavy tapestries. The process is practiced, methodical. Servants and priests work together in silence, washing your skin, dressing you in royal vestments, arranging your hands just so upon your chest. A coin is placed upon each eyelid, a relic of old superstitions clinging stubbornly to the new century. Your wounds are covered, the worst of the corruption hidden beneath silk and ermine. For a few brief hours, you look less a ruin, more a king. The bells toll, echoing through the damp morning, announcing to the city that the long wait is over. Crowds gather in the streets, murmuring prayers or gossip, or simply standing in the gray light, as though witnessing an eclipse. Some cross themselves, some stare with blank, expectant faces. A few, already thinking ahead, murmur the names of your successor, calculating the fortunes of a new reign. The drama is already shifting. The principal actor has departed, and the scene must change. In the palace, the great and small alike gather in corridors, antechambers, and halls. The news spreads in waves. The king is dead. There is relief in some voices, sorrow in others, calculation in almost all. The business of death is brisk, unsentimental. Officials draw up records, doctors sign statements, priests intone absolutions, and scribes begin the work of translating a death into history. There are documents to sign, rings to collect, seals to break. The body itself is now a symbol, a relic, something to be transported and displayed, then sealed away behind stone. The royal funeral is an affair of ritual and spectacle. Nobles and clergy gather in their best finery, faces somber, eyes watchful. Your coffin is carried through streets lined with banners, your effigy set atop it, hands folded in eternal prayer. The people watch in silence as the procession winds its slow, stately way toward the abbey. Prayers are recited, incense fills the air, and the same ancient words echo beneath the arches that heard your coronation, your triumphs, your confessions, your decline. Yet, even as the funeral proceeds, even as your name is solemnly intoned, you sense the first cracks of forgetting. Courtiers glance at each other over your bier, already aligning themselves with the living. The priests, their work nearly done, allow their minds to drift to other matters, another service, another dying man, another soul to save. In kitchens and stables, the staff trade stories. The day the king rode out to hunt, the time he lost his temper at a banquet, the odd way he insisted his boots be polished. Some tales are affectionate, some mocking, some quietly relieved that the reign of suffering is finished. Rumors blossom in the shadows. Some say you died raving, haunted by the ghost of Richard, your old rival. Others claim it was the pox, or poison, or a curse laid by a foreign witch. A few, with the confidence of hindsight, insist they always knew you would die this way, slowly, painfully, a warning to all who grasp at crowns not meant for them. The truth is simpler and far duller. A body battered by ambition, age, and the brutal indifference of disease finally gave out. But simple truths rarely last. The official chronicles are compiled, your name rendered in careful Latin, your titles listed, your reign measured in battles, taxes, treaties, and trouble. Scribes debate the wording of your epitaph, weighing your victories against your failures. In a few brief lines, your life is fixed for future generations. Henry, King of England, reigned so many years, died of illness, succeeded by his son. The details are smoothed away, the awkward truths filed down to the bone. As the tomb is sealed and the banners lowered, the world moves on. The council meets to confirm the new king. Messengers ride out with proclamations. Merchants set new prices. Priests pray new prayers. And in the city's taverns, men raise their cups to the future, not the past. Your name lingers for a while on the lips of those who remember, then fades, washed away by the steady tide of time and necessity. Within a month, your chamber is cleaned, the linens replaced, the smell of sickness erased by the sharp tang of vinegar and new rushes. Servants gossip about the new king's habits, forgetting which ones belong to whom. The children of the palace invent games, running through the halls where once they were told to walk quietly for the king's sake. Life, indifferent and practical, resumes its forward crawl. You, for your part, are gone. Whatever thoughts you had, whatever regrets, whatever flashes of humor or shame are dissolved now, dispersed in the air, buried in the stone, scattered in the prayers of those who briefly cared. The story is no longer yours. It belongs to the historians, the storytellers, the gossips and priests and bored officials with blank pages to fill. In the end, this is how kings are remembered, not for their crowns, nor their suffering, nor even their sins, but for the way they vanish into the machinery of history. A funeral, a tale or two, a page in a chronicle, then silence. Only the stones endure, and even they cannot remember your name.